areas, to this day, the Gonds sing about the Rani, to this day. And the songs about her, this is why she is interesting, that Rani Durgavati died on the 24th of June, 1564. That's nearly 460 odd years ago. But for the last 5 centuries, the songs about her have remained unchanged. She is a symbol of, she's a combination of protection and piety. She is a symbol for the Gonds of deliverance. Whenever they think about their past, whenever they want to escape their present, they hark back to her rule. Pura Rajma Sona Ka Sikka. You know, that is what her rule was, a golden age. And again you find Gond folk tales and folk songs referencing the Rani. And that has remained unchanged for 5 centuries. Mind you, I want to point this out, that when it comes to actual primary sources, there can be some reasons for spin doctrine. For instance, if you look at the Ramnagar inscription, they have tried to sort of devalue the battle of Narayanala, or the battle of Damo, because by that time, this was about 100 years after Rani Durgavati, the Gonds were then part of the Mughal Empire. They were vassal kings of the Mughals. So they did not want to piss off the reigning Mughal emperor, which was Shah Jahan. So they called Shah Jahan like Arjuna, and they call Asaf Khan is like Bhima in prowess, and that it was just a tax raid. Despite these attempts at official spin doctrine, if you go to Jabalpur to this day, popular opinion and folk tales and songs universally despise Asaf Khan and Akbar. It hasn't worked. So remember that this is a people, they are holding on to the narrative. I mean, Vikramji and Anand were just talking about the narrative. This is how they have held on to their narrative. For 5 centuries, that narrative about the Queen has not changed.
Yeah. My next question is, again, to understand her story, her success as well as her failure, and the way we govern land is federated structures. So it's very interesting that tribals were always given a certain sense of very practical autonomy, so that their life, the livelihood, their the osmotic relationship they had with the forests, in the very sustainable way in which they actually exploited that resource, needed to have a certain sense of federated autonomy. Now, as far as administration is concerned, tell us how that worked. And as far as military is concerned, tell us how that worked too, and how it played out in her life.
So it's interesting, because if you look at the Rajgond dynasty, which is where Durgavati came from, and you look at the folk songs and folk tales of the region, Garha and surrounding areas, you will find that over centuries, they deify or they sing praises of their kings and queens. Of course, Rani Durgavati has been turned into a goddess, but even others. And it is the outsiders who are looked at as enemies. Naam Asaf Dusman ke. So it is the outside. It is the Mughal, it is the British. The Goras are bad, the Mughals are bad. And our kings and queens have our interest at heart. The reason why this narrative persists is because for the longest time, when the Rajgons were in power, they followed a kind of very decentralized federal structure. Let me talk about Durgavati herself. She had 52 Garha. Garha, it's like a 4th district. So she had about 52 Gars under her control. But these Gars, most of them, had their own little structure, and her control was limited to the fact that when she went to battle, they would come and give her men and arms. So it was like a very decentralized nature. The army and the actual law and administration of those Garhas was handled by the local Raja or Rai. And they used to call themselves either Raja or Rai. But they were under the the Rajgond monarchs of the day, whoever the Rajgond monarch was. Now, in Durgavati's case, she had about 23,000 villages which were directly under her. Even these, half of them were more or less controlled federally by the Garh districts. So you can imagine that unlike the Mughal structure, which was centralized, and there was a central authority, which was the imperial command, who would send Jagirdars to various corners of the kingdom, this was not like that. This was a hereditary post, including down to the villages. So you will say that, say for instance, a Garh district will have 1,000 villages. Now in the village, the Patwari would be your unit of law and order, and that role was also hereditary. So you had a very decentralized hereditary structure, and matters of law and order would come to the queen only when they had not been settled by the local Patwari or the local Raja. Very, very federal. Now, what this means is that the people obviously loved the structure because it gave them a lot of freedom. But what it means is, militarily, in medieval terms, this was a disaster. It was a complete disaster. Why was it a disaster? Because the queen's army, therefore, she had to depend on her 52 Garha Rajas to send her soldiers. Those soldiers were armed, trained by the respective Garha Rajas, which means they were not of uniform quality. Many of them were not well trained. And how good they were in battle depended on how good a commander that Garha Raja was. Some of them were very good, some of them were not so good. So the army that she had at her disposal was not uniformly trained, not uniformly armed, and not of uniform quality. And that affected the final consequence of the last battle in her life.
But having said that, it's true that she talked about the 50+ skirmishes she had with the border districts. So there is a very good description of the battle she fought with Baz Bahadur, and the strategies she used in order to neutralize the Baz Bahadur's advantages. So that's a very interesting part of the book. Now let's talk about the queen a little bit. You know, you're a woman, I'm a woman, she's a goddess. To me, she is a goddess. These ancient monarchs, not ancient actually, the Hindu monarchs, they had such a beautiful, unself-conscious, spontaneous relationship with dharma. Yes. So you had an entire aspect of their life gone in building temples, and the entire ecological and economic, spin-offs that come off the temple building, and the respect for the environment. You know, if you do not feed your kingdom, then your kingdom is sad. So talk to us a little bit about this lady in her 15 years, the amount she took care. Because my sister is a farmer, she'll tell you how deep the water tables are going down in the farm, and and how we need to conserve water. Here is a lady who made catchment ponds, yes. Not one, not two. So tell us a little bit about this relationship. She had tribal subjects. Their relationship with the forest was very, very important. They grew wheat, they exported wheat. It was a country that never went hungry. So tell us about these two aspects of a monarch. You know, this thing about the temple, the deity, how important and central it was to everybody, you know. And also this thing about something as crucial as water. We don't realize how important these systems are, you know.
So before I start off answering this question, just want to tell you that you must be wondering why I'm looking like the sun, wearing a yellow sari. I wear it yellow dhoti and yellow saris on special occasions, including on the 24th of June every year, which is celebrated as Balidan Divas, which is her, her sacrifice day. But coming to Rani Durgavati, she was such an exceptional monarch because she was known as the Tal Talao Rani. She excavated 64 water bodies, 64. And she had lakes named after pretty much anyone, including, her husband, her father-in-law, her son. There was Bal Sagar, which
elephant.
And the elephant, yeah, Hathi Tal. So she had a favorite elephant who was like a son to her, who went to battle with her and died for her. So there was a Tal Talao named after him, Hathi Tal. Then she had Tal Talaos named after the famous people, her critical people in her court, including some of her famous generals. So there were 64 Tal Talaos that she excavated, and the whole point was that she was determined to make sure that no one went thirsty in her kingdom. Now remember, this part of India is not necessarily a very richly rain-fed part, so having a monarch who looks after your water needs is a very, very critical part of the prosperity of that kingdom. So one of the reasons why Gara became such, became a grain bowl and became rich and all that was because Durgavati herself was totally committed to building tanks and building temples. These were the twin responsibilities of the Rani. There are several temples that are connected with her name. And interestingly, and here I want to make that distinction, I would like to give the examples of two temples. Now, the first is a Sharda Mata Mandir. Sharda Mata Mandir in near Madan Mahal, which used to be one of her palaces in Jabalpur. You can go and see it. It's a beautiful temple. And if you go to that temple is directly associated with Rani Durgavati. She was the one who consecrated that temple. And there is a very interesting ritual that happens in the temple. I don't want to give it away. You can read the book and see what it is. That ritual was started by her. And for the last 460 odd years, every year, people go to that temple to perform that ritual, connected to her name. So you have Sharda Mata Mandir on the one hand. Then on the banks of the Narmada, you have a Shiv temple that she built. Now obviously the current structure, if you go and see it, you'll say that it is fairly modern, must be about it says 60, 70 years old, but this temple was rebuilt several times over the years. So, and of course she being a Chandel Rajput, she was a Chandel Rajput, so her Kula Devi was Manaiya Devi. And there is a Manaiya Devi Mandir also in Kalinjar Fort, although Kalinjar was not her patrimony, but it was, she was a princess of Ratmahova, but they were part of the Chandel line. So what I'm saying is that if you look at what her responsibilities are, and again, there are contemporary references, there is a book that she had commissioned during her reign called Prastav Ratnakar. Now, Prastav Ratnakar talks about her duties, her sacred duties, and we see how much time she spent in consecrating temples, in doing yagyas, in various other, sacred duties that she had, and not just her husband Dalpati, as long as he was alive, her father-in-law Sangram Shah. So they clearly took their duties, these twin duties of the sacred duties and the secular duties. They were equally important, and she took them very seriously.
Incidentally, I am wearing a Maheshwari in honor of Ahilyabai Holkar that I would like to talk about with Vikram later on in the day. This is just to honor two ladies and the two things that we wear. Now with regard to Durgavati, she, let's talk about, I don't want to use the word feminist, but she was a woman. She commanded the respect of her people. She was a widow.
Yes.
And it's not just Hindus.
Yes.
So can you just talk about what it must have been in her capacity to actually win the loyalty of no less than Afghans? Yes. And what must have been the strategic mind of this lady in her time to not only, we have such weird notions about a widow in India, and we are so, like I tell my students, one would think if you read British accounts that, every Bengali woman whose husband died had to, jump into a fire. I mean, that's the kind of ridiculous, legacy we bear about the widow in India. And yet, Durgavati, can you just, do justice to her in that aspect? I don't want to use the word feminist.
Okay. She was, so first Durgavati in many ways was a very unusual monarch. And we were just talking about Akbar just a couple of minutes back, and we today when we look at Akbar, we say he was a very unusual medieval monarch, in the sense that he was tolerant of all religions, and we have his comments about himself that I'm deeply ashamed of what I used to be before. He was by no means the only one, because if we look at Durgavati, we find that there is a very interesting episode where she actually defeats the Afghans in battle, the Miana Afghans. The Miana Afghans used to be in the Elichpur area, along the banks of the Son River. So these Miana Afghans, after Islam Shah Suri was, the Suris were defeated and the Mughals came back to power, the Miana Afghans went around that area fomenting trouble. They were just, loots, plain and simple looting. What Durgavati did was she defeated them, and defeated them in so definitively that they never ever molested her kingdom again. Not only that, a lot of them went and joined Durgavati. So the interesting thing is we find that there are these Afghan generals like Shams Khan Miana, Mubarak Khan, all these people, and there are a whole lot of them. There are like 6, 7 of them whose names have survived to this day, who all of them lost their lives fighting for her in the final battle. So this shows you that they respected this lady enough. First, they are defeated by her, and she earns their respect, and till the end of their days, they followed her to battle and gave their lives for her. So clearly, for a monarch to include defeated Muslims, generals into her army means that, she had a very clear idea of what tolerance meant. And that is something that was by no means peculiar only to the Mughal court, number one. Number two is that, if we look at the way she has, by the way, there are Tal Talaus also dedicated to some of these Muslim generals, by the way. So the whole point I'm trying to make here is that the monarchs of medieval India, many of them followed a similar routine, most of them. And these people, the Muslim generals who were included into court, both secular and military, were promoted according to their capabilities. There was no religious angle involved in that at all. Firstly, when it comes to feminism, the reason why I say that she is an utterly modern medieval queen is because in every decision she takes in her life, she pushes the envelope. Remember, she is a Chandel princess. This is a very, very iconic Rajput bloodline, right? What does she do? Her father organizes a Swayamvar. She runs away and marries a tribal Gond prince. Right? So this is an intercaste marriage. So unusual that there are only 2 examples of intercaste marriages in the entire 400 years of Rajgond history. Only 2. The first is Durgavati, the other one is when dynasty founder Yadurai married a Gond princess called Ratnabali. Only 2 examples. So she goes against tradition, marries the man that she loves. All right? When he dies, she doesn't jump into the sati fire. She says, I will rule. My son will be king, I will be regent. And she fobs off this brother-in-law out of Garha. He skulks in, in another kingdom called Chanda. And he skulks there till she's dead. He never comes back. And then, if we look at, again, we go back to Ramnagar inscription. It is very clear that the kingdom is ruled and the power structure is controlled by the queen. She's not a puppet queen. She's taking all her decisions herself, okay? And right till the very end, when there is a beautiful passage, and again, it's very interesting that Abul Fazl being Akbar's hagiographer, and Akbar is her enemy. So she is Akbar's enemy, therefore Akbar is his master, therefore she needs to be demonized, which he does. He does demonize her. But he treats her with unusual amount of respect. Throughout the account that he gives of her, he keeps talking about her nobility, talks about her valor, talks about the fact that she never backs down, no matter how much the Mughals are bullying her, she is not going to blink. And this earns her respect from somebody like Abul Fazl, who records it in the Akbarnama, right? So even there, right till the very end, she is saying, my dharma comes first. Death before dishonor. I am not going to back down to bullying. I am not going to allow these people to run riot. I will face them in battle. I will take them on. And you know, this is amazing strength. I mean, it gives me goosebumps every time I think about it, because all the men around her really, really let her down. If she was defeated in the final battle, it was because the men around her let her down.
In fact, that was going to be my next and my last question. I'll leave the audience 10 minutes to ask theirs. You know, when you have this graphic description of the battle, you know, and then it's very disturbing and very disheartening, because as you rightly, as you said, the first day she was victorious. And she implored her generals to take proactive measures so as to, you know, neutralize the artillery that Asaf Khan had, which she didn't. But then, you know, they don't listen to her. So that's where she's let down. And sure enough, the artillery is there the next morning and puts her at a disadvantage. But, you know, it is the battle scene with the description that hit me so badly, and I've gone on record to say that I've wept reading your book. You know, and you talk about a picture that has been painted that depicts this scene, you know, where she's on her elephant, she's wounded at the moment when the arrow actually strikes her. And you have the, you know, the sort of, the control of the battle sort of disentangles and dismantles around her, and she knows that there's nothing she can do about it. Now, if there is a picture, why is it not in your book?
Thank you for asking this. So there is a picture. There is a very evocative picture in the Akbarnama, which documents this particular moment when the queen has been hit by an arrow, and Abul Fazl describes it also. One arrow at the temple, one at the neck, and she pulls it out, but the arrowhead remains. So she's bleeding profusely. And this picture is right now sitting in the Victoria and Albert Museum as part of the Akbarnama papers in UK. The reason it was not included in this book, despite our best efforts, is because the V&A asked for £300 for it. So first they steal our stuff, and then they get us to pay to use what was ours to begin with. That's nice, right? It's a nice business plan. But what I would really want is for the government of India to take this up so that whatever of ours is sitting in British museums should at least be allowed to be used by scholars free of cost. So I couldn't pay £300 for this. And I'm really sorry, I couldn't pay, but that picture is there. If you want, please Google it, you'll see the picture. Now this picture is very beautiful because you see it's a tableau. If you see the Akbarnama pictures, they are tableaus. So this picture is a tableau. And Rani Durgavati is right at the bottom left-hand corner of the picture. And we see her wounded, and we see the elephant is also wounded. Sarman, the elephant, is wounded, is very badly wounded, is bleeding. And we see all these Mughal soldiers with their helmets and the curved swords who are swarming the picture. So in this picture, she is not center stage. She is not center stage. She is in a corner. And like what has happened to her in post-independence year, she has become a footnote in her own story. But the good news is, this picture, you see this? This is almost near contemporary portrait of hers. This picture is hanging in the Chennai Museum. And the lovely, lovely authorities in the Chennai Museum allowed us to use it for free. So if you want to see what she looks like, you can go take a look at her in Chennai Museum.
So the last point before the audience asks the question is that she fought that last battle, and she was determined to preserve actually her body from dishonor. But you make a very disturbing, veiled quote from the other chronicler of Akbar's time. And actually, when I read that line, that she'd rather die than be defiled, I immediately said, you never know with this enemy. You know, they can desecrate a dead body. But can you just end with what you think seems to be a veiled reference to precisely that?
So this is the most disturbing part. Okay. This is the most disturbing part of Rani Durgavati's story. She killed herself because when she realized that escape was not an option anymore. There was just no way she could get out. And as a result, she killed herself. The Gonds believe that her elephant also died, but he covered her body with his own, which may well be true. But Mughal chroniclers like Badauni, from their references, it becomes fairly obvious that her body was desecrated. And Gond folk tales and folk songs also mention this very clearly, that apna tan bachao ma. You know, so she is looking to protect her feminine form, even in death. So this is how a great warrior and a woman who really did not do anything at all politically to cross the Mughals. She, unlike the Sisodias, she didn't have a history with them at all. She was just plundered, looted, killed, desecrated, simply because she was a woman and in charge of a rich kingdom. That's it.
Questions? Keep them short and no back and forth.
That was a great session. Thank you so much. So my question is that, earlier in your speech you said we learn more about the wars that we lost. And I seem to find this very systematic narrative in the history that I was taught in school, that, we lost more wars than we won. India never attacked another country, and this continued to be the prime focus of how we learned the freedom struggle as well, where submissive and peace seem to be...
You have to come to your point, please. We don't have the time.
Yeah. So do you think that this was done to change the perception of India to be very defenseless, which has led to our generation being very self-loathing Indians?
Yeah.
And
absolutely, I totally agree, because I think the whole point of picking and cherry-picking battles from our past only to show how valiantly we fought and lost, sort of reiterates this point that we were never a warrior class, never meant to, win battles. We were just nice people. We even got our independence through, non-violent means, quite forgetting the work that was done by others who have been othered in the narrative. So yes, absolutely right.
Congratulations, Nandini, for a brilliant talk and a brilliant book. I just don't have a question, but I just want to add something to what you said. You talked about intercaste marriages. I want to say marriages were always intercaste, especially among rulers. And I want to give the example of the Satvana dynasty, which ruled in that area, South India, almost 1,000 years before Rani Durgavati. The Satvanas were Brahmins, and they married a Shaka princess. Shaka were for Malechas, if you want to call that. And they also married Naga princesses.
Yes.
So, we have to re-look at our past when we talk about these intercaste marriages. They were the norm, not the exception. But congratulations on a brilliant talk.
Thank you, Meenakshi ji. Coming from you, that's high praise. And I just want to say the Naga princess, Chandragupta Vikramaditya also had, Kuber Naga was his second wife, who was a Naga princess. There are examples, yes. Lichavi is also Samudragupta's mother.
One more question?
Yes, we have 1 more minute. Anybody?
Okay. Yeah, there is a question.
Brilliant story, thank you very much. I'm from Sangha, and in Ekatmata Strotra, we have a mention of Rani Durgavati. Nevertheless, we didn't know much about her. But my question to you is, now the book is released, how you percolate this message to the younger generations who are constantly fed with the information that is not ours?
I hope that's the reason why I have written this book. I always say I am not a historian. I am a journalist. I am only reporting a story that happened 460 years ago. So I have written this like a journalistic account. It is easy to read, it is pacey, and I just want to make it very easily understandable, relatable, so that young people will be able to read it, enjoy it. Yesterday I was at the Times Lit Fest. I was a bunch of kids, 15, my daughter's age, 15, 16 years old, they walked up and they said, "Ma'am, why don't history books, why are they so boring? Why can't we have stories?" But the word history includes the word story in it. We have to tell them as stories, so kids will enjoy them.
So well done, Nandini. Thank you very much for writing this book. I did not imagine that it would impact me so much, and really, I mean, to bring forward a heroine like her, I mean, in all of our hearts, thank you so much. Thank you so much.